Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Do the Work with me, your host, Madeline Hewitt. I am so excited for this week's guest. She is a partner and managing director in the Bonston Group Wealth Management Practice, a certified divorce financial analyst, host of the Fiscal Feminist podcast, and author of The Fiscal Feminist, a financial wake up call for women. Kimberlee Davis, welcome to Do the Work.
Well, Madeline, thank you very much for having me today. I'm super excited to talk with you and your audience and explore all the questions that you're going to ask me.
Yes, this is going to be a fun one. So, I actually just got done reading her book, Fiscal Feminist. This will all be linked in the description and everything, but it was so good. I genuinely enjoyed it. I feel like you covered so many topics but you made it consumable and easy to understand, which I really appreciated because it's not always easy to do in the world of finance. So yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed the book, and I want to start by kind of going over your story, kind of how you got to where you are today, and kind of what prompted the book and everything that's come since then.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for reading the book. And I'm really glad that you enjoyed the book and you thought, I hope that you felt that you walked away with some useful information that was conveyed in a kind of digestible fashion. I think a lot of times with these books, if we're talking in a way that is over our audience, it's not helpful to them. So, just to kind of break it down into tangible things that we can do to improve our holistic financial situation and also our mindset. 99% of this stuff is all up here. It's how we view it. So, yeah, my journey is been quite non-linear for lack of a better word. And it's been long because I'm little long in the tooth, as they say. So, yeah, I started off as a lawyer. I went to law school because that was, as I was growing up, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And in the early 80s, I graduated from law school. And so, as I was kind of growing up as a child and as a teenager, it was like the beginning. It wasn't the beginning. It was probably the second wave, as they say, of the kind of women's movement,
Mm.
maybe feminist movement, if you want to call it that. And Gloria Steinem was out there. And I really wanted to be a professional person and I wanted to do something that allowed me to kind of control my own destiny. So those ideas were floating around out there. It wasn't as fine-tuned as it could have been, but, the idea was get out there, and the message was somewhat like, "You can do it all," which we ultimately learned you probably can't without being exhausted all the time, but there are ways to do it, and good is good enough. You don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect at everything. So in any event, I did go to law school, and I became a lawyer, and I did that for several years, and I enjoyed that job. I then got married along the way, and I had 3 children. And then my husband at the time was asked to move to England. So I agreed to do that. It was supposed to be for 2 years, but 30 years later, he still lives there, and I lived there for 14 years. So the reason that this was kind of a crucial moment that I didn't quite understand was that I had made a career decision that was going to really affect the rest of my life. And so my 25-year-old self or 28-year-old self at the time didn't really think about my 64-year-old self now, okay? Because there was just a complete disconnect, right? Who thinks about that when they're in their
Exactly.
20s? I'm going to tell you all that you should be thinking about that, but that's gone down the line in this podcast. So the other thing is at the time, nobody talked about prenups. It was still very much, even if you were a professional woman and all that stuff, people would still start giving you like the hairy eyeball when you were 30, like, you ever going to get married? And, you could be president of Microsoft and people would still be looking at you like, well, that's really great, but, you're going to get married. So it's a different generation. And really, at that time, I think most people thought prenups or even discussing anything about money or careers or who's going to stay home would be a real buzzkill and not an appropriate conversation. So I didn't have any of those. So we moved to London, and then this just went on and on. And I did try to do other things, but I couldn't do what my career really was at the time. I had already transitioned into being an investment banker, and all of the things that I was qualified for, I didn't have the qualifications there. Plus, I didn't have two passports like my ex-husband did, so it took me a while to become a permanent resident. So there were all kinds of things kind of against me. In addition to the fact I at the time I had three kids under the age of six, moving to a whole new country. So as time went on, I did start a fashion business. That was just kind of an accidental thing. I love clothes and I love clothing and shoes and the fashion as an art form. But I realized, that thing started to become something bigger than I had anticipated. I ended up selling the collection twice a year to the 10 best stores of Saks Fifth Avenue.
Oh,
So I was
wow.
actually then running like a manufacturing company. And then I had, employees and all the things that I liked about fashion. I started to really hate. And then I realized I love clothing, but I don't love the
The
business
business
of
of it.
making clothing.
Mhm.
It's a very intense business. It is just sucks cash. You've got to have a lot of things in order. So anyway, I did try to do a couple things. I also helped build a big school in a place called Swindon, because I'm very passionate about education because it changed my life. I didn't come from a lot of money, so going to Georgetown, getting scholarships here and there, then going to law school was literally a game changer for me. Um, but then I decided, I mean, the marriage was deteriorating. My children were now getting older. And I thought, okay, I really don't want to grow old in England. I love England, but I want to go back to the United States and I need to kind of self realize because I
Mhm.
put a lot of things on hold. So that was what I did. I moved to California, and one of my children went right to Georgetown, and because she was older, and the other two were in high school. Um, and so that's how I got back here. But at the same time, we were beginning this very protracted divorce, which was occurring in England because my ex-husband is domiciled there, and I had to keep going back and forth there. And we had lawyers and barristers because it was a litigated divorce. So two lawyers who get divorced are probably
I can
going to
only
have a
imagine.
litigated divorce. Yeah, so there was a lot of acrimony, but in the end, we kind of came after a couple of years. It took probably 3 years, and we got to the point where there was a divorce decree. Okay, so kids were kind of acclimated. We were sort of getting the hang of it. I was like, okay, now I can really start focusing on reestablishing my career because I'm not going to keep going to London and all this other stuff. So that happened, I believe, in April was the decree, and then I started looking for what was my next move. What was I going to do for a living? And I was trying to figure that out. I was looking at business development. It hadn't occurred to me, to be honest, to be a wealth manager at that point. I was looking at real estate. I had also my real estate broker's license, so there were possibilities out there that I was pursuing, and I was going on interviews. But then in October of the same year. Uh, I got an email from my solicitor in England saying that she had gotten an email from my ex-husband's solicitor. And I was like, why are we even having this? Why are we communicating? Like,
Mhm.
this thing is done. And it wasn't done because he essentially um, said that he could no longer pay the alimony part of the settlement. So this was a problem. I had, a daughter in college. I had two kids in high school that were in private school because they had gone to private school in England and they were trying to like acclimate into public high school, but their curriculum was very different. So, okay. And so the reality was is that he gave me some money for like 5 or 6 months, but it took 2.5 years to get that second
Ooh.
divorce decree resolved. These court schedules are backed up, and I did a podcast with a divorce attorney last Friday at a top LA law firm, and divorce law firm. And, she said litigated divorces just are so expensive and they take so long because of the court schedule. So, long story short, at this point, I was really up against it because there was no way to compel him, even with an interim order, because he said he didn't have anything. I was running out of money because these lawyers,
And
barristers,
bleeding
solicitors
you
are
dry.
bleeding me dry. I'm trying to keep these kids in private high school. So we keep downsizing into smaller places to live. And I'm literally like not trying not to spend any money. I'm like selling my jewelry to make certain things hit,
Mhm.
so that we're not like literally like eating peanut butter. And it sounds dramatic, but because I was living a good life in
Mhm.
London, but all of this fighting and acrimony and defaulting. So I then decided, okay, I have to get a job ASAP. Like there's no more time. I'm, I'm just fraught and paralyzed with fear over money. I don't know how this is going to end. So I literally just made getting a job become my job, and I applied for over 100 things. So everything from business development, director of operations, at a Starbucks. I mean, I tried everything. I was 53 at the time, so it
Yeah.
wasn't like people were lining up to say, "Hey, even with your," and I had a couple of executive recruiter people tell me, which infuriated me, you need to take all the legal stuff off your resume
Why? Because it's too
because
niched?
you're overqualified.
Overqualified. Okay.
You're like a 53-year-old woman with a bunch of stuff and you haven't worked in the United States in a while. So, yeah, no one really cares that you worked at a top law firm and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
Because they were like, you could go become an executive assistant to somebody or whatever. Because obviously, when you need money, there are different types of jobs you can get. You can get just a job to keep a roof over your head, or you're in the middle of something and you
Mhm.
just don't want to make it your career, or you can pick something that's a career, or you can go to something that's a passion. There are these different, levels of job things that you do at different points in your life. So eventually, I did get an interview at Morgan Stanley, and then I got offered a job to be a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. So that was like one of those moments that after a lot of rejection and interviews and everything else, I couldn't believe it, but it worked.
Mhm.
And it was actually like the universe somehow
It fell
put
in
me
your
there
lap. Yeah.
because it's a really good combination of my skills. I was an IPO lawyer. I know a lot about the capital markets. I know a lot about estate law. I know a lot about tax law. And I then became a banker. So all of those things together helped me in being an effective wealth manager and a very holistic one,
Mhm.
because I can help clients not only with their investment strategy, but also with things having to do with their legal situation, whether it's estate planning or divorce planning or prenups or whatever. Um, and I don't function as a lawyer, but I am a conduit, and I also sit in on the meetings and counsel them because I do have a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst. So I understand the economics of divorce. So I started at Morgan Stanley, and then eventually I became part of the Bonson Group. We were all at Morgan Stanley.
Mm.
We then left Morgan Stanley to become independent, and there were four of us at the time. David Bonson is the founding partner and the chief investment officer. And we left, the four of us, and with a couple of support people, and the company began to grow. I grew my book of business exponentially because I just, busted my butt. I mean, that was it. All I did was think about building this book of business. And thank God it all came to fruition. There were, twists and turns and some hard times, and it didn't happen overnight. But, the Bonson Group now has 50 people. We have offices in 5 or 6 different cities.
Wow.
Um, I'm managing director and partner. I have a very significant book of business with, high net worth and ultra high net worth people as my clients, and, regular people too. But so as I was progressing through this, and I got to the point where I had grown my book of business to a place where I was comfortable with it, I started thinking, I really want to help women of all economic levels kind of not make the same mistakes that I made, because I was a fairly person educated in the world of
Mhm.
finance. I have all the qualifications that you would think, like, how did you get yourself into this mess and how didn't you know all those things you were supposed to know? And so I just started writing blogs about how I don't think enough people talk to women specifically. And I feel that the narrative with women growing up is that they aren't talked to the same way about money as maybe their male counterparts, because we have a lot of anachronistic thinking in the back of our heads. And people still, when I say to them, before you get married, you really need to speak about money with your partner. um, However, that whatever that relationship is, it becomes a business when you get married, because you're commingling your assets, your work product, all of this stuff, and we take that for granted. And also, we've been told that this is like a fairy tale. Love is sublime, love conquers all. That doesn't happen. And in fact, I think if you aren't honest with each other, the money thing will destroy your relationship. And I think it's been proven that like over 80% of divorces are about money.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just, and I also wanted women to like start making intentional career choices, to negotiate in their professional lives. So I wanted to like create this holistic platform that wasn't just about personal finance and what stock to invest in or whether to max out on your 401k and how to do all that stuff. I wanted it to be holistic. It was about, not only do you need to do all that stuff, which I encourage every single person to do in a responsible and sensible way, but you need to, on a micro level, handle your personal relationships with money in the same intentionality that you would your profession, because your personal money relationships can totally mess up your life if you
Mm-hmm.
are not careful with them. So that was what inspired me to do this platform. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went from the blog to social media stuff, and then I started doing the podcast, and then one day, silly me, I was just like, I think I'll write a book, not knowing what exactly that meant. And then I wrote the book, and that took a lot of time because I have a day job. Um, but the book was like really my passion, and I just wanted someone to say, okay, here's this like roadmap of some of the things I need to think about, from whether it's premarital planning, pre-divorce planning, personal finance, investment strategy, estate planning, all the things, retirement planning, whatever it is. If I just check some of these boxes, I'm going to be ahead of the game when I'm in my 60s or 70s and I'm thinking about retirement. And women are living longer than men
Mm-hmm.
by about 5 years statistically. That means you're going to have greater medical costs. And also, you need to fund a longer lifestyle. And then also, we take more time out of the workplace. We have the invisible labor issue. We have the motherhood penalty. And all of those things contribute. A lot of people have a gray divorce like me, and many women in their 50s do not pull, the rabbit out of the hat the way I did. They really are in
It's a
very
struggle.
constrained situations through their retirement. And, even if you are married, a lot of women will spend not a significant, but a good part of their life probably on their own after the death of a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not even just about divorce, but even if you choose not to get married, which is something I also write about. It's okay if you don't want to get married. This isn't like 1987 or 58. I respect that choice, and I also respect the choice of people not wanting to have children, because obviously that takes a big economic hit on you. Um, I love my kids. I have 3 of them, but I've spent a lot of money on college and law school and lessons and all the other things that make them the 3 great women that they are today. But that was at the expense of,
Yeah.
like, now my retirement. I'm going to have to work for a long time to make up for that, which is okay because I love what I do and I still feel fairly young and vibrant. But yeah, so that's kind of the long story of how I'm here talking to you. It's
Yeah.
just my passion is, I want everyone to realize this is an emergency. Okay. This isn't like optional. This is an emergency. I want to get like a big bullhorn and just, go out in the streets and say, everybody needs to wake up. Okay. Because if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else is going to do it. Even if you get married. I mean, I was speaking to someone the other day who's young. They've been married 4 years, known each other 6. They're thinking about getting a divorce. And guess what the reason is?
Money.
Money.
And okay, so that brings me to, before you get married, before you start talking about marriage, really honestly, I would say when you feel like things are starting to get serious, The conversation around money and relationships and opening up that door. Two of my favorite things from the book are identifying your money personality and identifying your money language. I have never heard it put like this before. I've never even thought about the conversation around money like that before. I think I, like most women, was one, not really ever taught a lot of financial literacy just because I don't know that my parents had that level of financial literacy. But then also, money's just inherently, we're taught it's a man's game, right? That the man will take care of it. He'll know how to do the stocks, he'll know how to handle the 401ks, he'll know how to do all of that. Like, let's not worry about it, right? So in order for us to kind of take control of that conversation and take control of, money in the relationship, let's talk about identifying our money personality. So there were 7 of them, correct?
Yes, there's different, everyone writes different things, but I did a lot of reading on it, and I liked the money personalities as explained by a guy called Ken Honda, who wrote a book called Happy Money: The Japanese Art of Making Peace with Your Money. And part of this is about having a relationship with yourself about money, right? Cuz I know for me, I didn't no one ever really talked to me about money,
Hmm.
and my parents had and they're still alive, very different value systems about money. My father he's one of the compulsive savers, which is one of the personalities. He will save at any expense, at any sacrifice of happiness or small, that he is a depression era guy who didn't have a lot of money. And so his motivation is always to save at any expense, no matter who he makes unhappy in doing that. And my mom was more of a what they call an amiable. Well, that's more of a money language, but she was more of a person who was a combination of a saver and a spender. And part of her money language is, and I'm talking about the personalities and language now, is being an amiable, which is she will literally hurt herself economically to make you happy through spending money. And I think I did that for a little bit in my life. So I had like watched these two people kind of navigate this relationship, which also involved a lot of fighting. Now, they never got divorced. They've actually been married 70 years, but they
Wow.
did fight a lot about money.
Hmm.
And I think my ex husband is also a compulsive saver. And I am more a kind of saver splurger. So I'm a little more fluid about money. So if you don't understand how you value money, then it's going to be really hard for you to have a relationship with somebody else who values money differently than you. And one of the things I found out in my research is that most people don't fight about the lack of money, they fight about how to spend money. So you might value one way of spending money, and your new person in your life may value something totally different. So if you don't like begin to understand how you value money, and then you need to communicate it to your partner, because it would be like if you were going to start a partnership with somebody to open up a lemonade stand, and you can make it into a business. You wouldn't like start that without having a conversation with them about how you're going to run that business. And because often when you start going out, that leads to living together. So that's the first thing, and that at that point I say, if you think you're going to live with somebody for several years without getting married, you should really have a cohabitation agreement, um, because it will set forth how money is going to be handled separately and together. And since you don't have the protection of marital laws or the guidance of that, when you do split up, if you buy things together and so on and so forth, it could be very, gnarly to kind of unwind all that. And so these money personalities are, I'll go through them real quick. There's the compulsive saver. So again, that's somebody who all they think about is safety, their nest egg, and making sure that, everyone's going to be safe down the line, but they will literally deny themselves and others reasonable enjoyments because it's all about saving. And I have some clients like that. I had a conversation with someone last week I just said to him, like, honestly, what you're saying to me is insane. You are denying yourself when we've run financial plans every which way from Sunday, and you're going to die at 100 with over $4 million. You
You're
need to
okay.
like you're fine. Take your wife out to dinner tonight, and please, you don't even have to get an expensive bottle of wine. Just enjoy your life. Then there's the compulsive spender, and this is just someone who impulsively spends money. It's random. They buy things they don't need, and for them, it's almost like they just seek immediate gratification all the time. And so that's their outlet for getting that. They need to buy a pair of shoes, or they're on Instagram, they have FOMO, whatever it is. So that's the compulsive spender. Then there's the compulsive moneymaker. I kind of fall into this a little bit now myself due to everything that's occurred, which is your main focus is to just grow your wealth, grow your net worth, and increase your earnings. And they kind of associate their, a happy life with making more and more money. And it's not so much, it's a little bit about safety, but it's also about recognition and recognition of their success. So I have a fair amount of that in me because I have a lot to prove, and I have a huge chip on my shoulder from all the stuff that happened. So I understand that about myself, right? Then there's the indifferent to money, and I have a number of these people in my mix. These are usually people who don't think about money, don't care about money, and most of them haven't earned their own money because they've inherited a lot of money, or they have gotten money in some way that is quite substantial, but they didn't work for it. So it could be in a divorce, it could be through an inheritance, it could, I don't know, maybe they won the lottery. I don't know any of those people, but I know the other kinds. Then there's the saver splurger, who's I'm also got a little bit of this. So we all have elements, right? You could be a combo. And that is like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of the personalities. You will, you're financially savvy, you understand, you're careful, but sometimes without warning, just suddenly you're going to indulge in something because, and I know for myself, if I'm feeling sorry for myself, or I think I'm working too hard, or I see, a bunch of people who are on vacation in Europe this summer, and I can't do that this summer because I paid for a wedding for my daughter last year and I promoted my book last year. So this year, no vacation. And I know that I am a saver splurger. So I know that I am not going to allow myself on any given day when I'm feeling a little bit iffy about everything, to go book something on Travelocity that I cannot afford, or call a travel agent, because I will regret that after I do it. So I know that that is something I might do. So I'm going to prevent myself from doing that. And then there's the gambler. We all know, people who they just, they can't help themselves. They're somewhere in between being a compulsive spender and just a gambler, and they like to gamble, and that will be their undoing. But they celebrate their financial wins, and they're devastated by their losses, and they can't seem to get out of that vicious circle. And then there is someone who is the worrier, and I had a bit of that during my post divorce shenanigans that I had to go through, where you're always in a fight or flight mode. You think you're going to end up destitute, and you're wringing your hands, and literally, I mean, look, there are just some people who are programmed that way. I literally have clients with, and I'm not making this up, they have over $20 million, and they worry a lot about like dying with no money, and they are very, very conservative.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that usually would probably come from some sort of trauma around money, whether it be divorce, whether it be some economical downturn. You would think that that would come from something like that. Because I feel like I'm a lot like you in that compulsive moneymaker, saver splurger for sure, and I definitely have worrier in me. And I think the compulsive moneymaker and the worrier both come from the fact that I am such a product of everything that happened in '08, the Great Recession and everything like that.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
we lost everything, and it happened quite literally overnight. And like
Yeah, that
moved.
will make you a worrier,
Yeah,
right?
and it
Unless you have
exactly,
amnesia, right?
it really, really defined my early adolescence, my early 20s. It's defined my life since '08, honestly. And my family never really recovered from it. And it was just, it was bad. So when it comes to my own personal finances, I am definitely always worried about not having enough and worried about how to
Mhm.
make more. But I'm
Correct.
also at the same time very much of the mindset that if I'm going to do something, I'm gonna do it. Like, if we're gonna go on a
Yeah.
trip and we're gonna go do this, like, let's go do it. Let's go enjoy it. Right. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
so I definitely feel like I have a little bit of all three of those in me. But I think those are so interesting, even to have the conversation around, hey, what do you think yours is? Because it opens up this conversation of why are you like this, right? Like, what kind of fuels your mindset around money and how you like to spend or save or whatever it may be. And I think that's a conversation that people don't ever like have super pointedly with people. Like, let's
No,
hash
I
it
mean,
out.
I think women and men think it's very unromantic,
Mhm.
and it's a buzzkill. And I think, well, why is that? Like, how have we well, I know how we've come to this because we've all read a million fairy tales and think,
Literally.
all this crazy notions, and men feel like they've got to swoop in, like they're I don't know, some men. I hope there are more evolved men now. I think there are. But, I think women too, they feel like that this is just a step too far for them to take because maybe they won't look as sexy, or they won't be as lovable, or they won't seem as demure, whoever wants to feel that way. I don't know. But, and so the thing is, over time, like if my first husband and I had a conversation about before we, signed on the dotted line, and he explained to me, and I saw inklings of this, but when we were going out and even when we were engaged, but I was a lawyer, he was a lawyer. We were both equals at that point, making a fair amount of money. When I stopped doing that and was staying home with the children and then was going over to England to support his career, all of a sudden I felt like I wasn't a stakeholder anymore. Like he was the
Mm.
stakeholder and I was just kind of like, I don't know. I was the mom, the help, the cook, the this, the that, the nanny. And then all of a sudden he was making the money. So he was the stakeholder. Well, that's BS because when you have that social contract with somebody, then you're both stakeholders, regardless of who's working, not working, whatever. But you need to have that conversation before all of that happens. So you both understand. Like if I understood that he was like this guy will not spend money. I mean, he did not split the cost of my daughter's wedding half and half with me.
Mhm.
He just is that person. And that's how he lives. So if I had known that, if I had really had this conversation with him, we would have either had to go to counseling, and there are financial counselors for couples now, or we would have just not gotten married because it wouldn't have worked out.
Mhm.
And I think, obviously, I'm glad that we got married because I have my 3 kids. But in retrospect,
It would have
I'm
saved
not
you a lot.
sure. Yeah, and I mean, we just are not compatible when it comes to money. It's our downfall. And so I do think that, we have to like let all these antiquated ideas go, stop having this anachronistic thinking. I mean, do we want to go back to the days of Jane Austen when, everybody was their marriage was planned around money, so the woman had to marry somebody with money, or if she had money she had to give it all over to the husband and not have anything to do with it anymore. We're not, we don't want to go back to where 1976 when I graduated from high school, you couldn't get a credit card if you were a married woman without the signature of your brother or your husband or some dude that you were related to.
I want that to sink
um,
in. Like 1976. That is not that long ago. And we as women
no.
could not get our own credit. That's
Think about that.
it.
And also, I met this woman when I was at Morgan Stanley. She was a rock star. She was like in her 70s when I started. And she was telling me that when she started Morgan Stanley in 1977, she was married. They needed her to get a letter of permission from her husband that he was okay with her working at Morgan Stanley.
What? That's
Mhm.
wild to me. And it's not that long ago. And I think sometimes it's
No.
very easy for us to kind of disconnect and not realize just how close history is. And I just that's wild to me. I mean, the 70s was really not that long ago.
No, and the thing is like if women today aren't going to have these conversations, then they're going to be in the same position that a lot of my generational compatriots are in, because they are going to continue to have the same problems that we, as you know, like we still only make 82 cents on the dollar. That's a fact. We still have, even when we are primary breadwinners, we still do 75% of the caregiving, because we are not negotiating on a micro level in our own households to say, uh, excuse me, can we please share this stuff in a more equitable fashion? And they did a whole thing on Netflix about this. In fact, I met one of the couples that was in it. It was like a documentary. I can't remember the name of it, but where they followed these 5 or 6 couples around, and they were both professionals, and how, you know, it always really fell on the woman to kind of do most of it, and they were trying to get men to kind of get with it and see that they needed to do more, and they did kind of evolve through, well, each couple did it, some did, some didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that for some reason it always seems okay for the women to do it. And then there were other studies I read that I put in the book, is where, you know, women who do make more money than their husband, a good percentage of them lie and say their husband makes more than them and still do all the caregiving. So with all of that, and the fact that we are often more likely to step out of the workplace for caring for parents or caring for kids, you know, we have more breaks in our career. Hence, our careers don't develop as quickly. We stop contributing to Social Security during those moments. We aren't contributing to our 401k. We can do a spousal IRA, but it's only 5 or 6 thousand a year. So all of those things mean that if something happens along the way, when you are older, your life is going to look very different than it might when you're in your 30s or 40s and everything's peachy keen, because
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have these conversations. And, you know, how you don't have to be confrontational with your partner when you talk about money. It should be considered a love language in my mind. And I look at being organized with your money as, it means that you love yourself because you're taking care of yourself, and you're reducing stress that you will have, that will come along if you are not financially organized and proactive. And it's a love language to you and your partner, that you want this thing to work. So you're going to just like nip all the possible stuff down the road that's so unnecessary in the bud, you know? And again, like, talking to this younger couple the other day, and I don't know, you know, the guy was frustrated because he thought the woman wasn't paying credit cards off in the way that she should, and he claimed she didn't understand that, you know, paying the minimum payment, whatever, wasn't something that she understood was not a good plan. But it caused acrimony, and to the point now where there's so many things wrapped up in money that it, you know, it's not healthy for the relationship. So this is so easy to obviate.
Just talk,
Y
have the
Just talk.
conversation, have a real honest conversation, and keep keep the lines of communication open throughout the relationship. Be honest about what's going on with you personally, if your priorities have changed, if your goals have changed. I think
Yes.
always,
It's not one and done. It's
no, it's a
ongoing.
constant
Yeah.
ongoing, I love the way that you equate finances with self-care, because I do think that it should be a form of a self-care habit. You see all over the internet these days of all of these different habits that you should have to take care of yourself, and putting your finances into that same bucket is a great way to kind of reframe your mindset about it and make it a joyful experience, something fun to do with your partner, something fun to do for yourself, because it, like you're saying, it does reduce stress, it does make your life better, it is a form of self-care, and I love
I
that.
mean, I challenge anyone out there to tell me that when they're living paycheck to paycheck, which I did for several years because it took me a while to get this business up and running, and I had 3 kids, and you know, it wasn't good. But I was waiting for my paycheck to clear before I put,
Mm-hmm.
pay my rent, and then waiting for my rent check to clear before I put gas in my car. When you are that stressed out about money, or you're just fighting with somebody about money all the time, it is not good for your health. Your high blood, give you high blood pressure. It'll make you produce cortisol. You will be angry all the time. So it's like so, to me, intuitive that like if you don't go to the doctor and there's something wrong with you and you wait too long, by the time you go, it just might be too late because too much damage has been done. This is the same thing with money. Like if you can't get your head around like simple budgeting, how much money you have coming in, how much money do you have going out? Do you have a lot of credit card debt? These are not very complicated things. It is literally simple math. And it's just a matter of, I need to know how much money I have coming in, how much money I have going out. Am I spending more than I have coming in? Am I funding it by credit cards? How am I going to get out of this mess? And if you are able to have a partner that you can talk to about this stuff, it's important to know, like, does your partner want children? If so, who's going to take care of the children? Are you going to stay home? Are they going to stay home? Is no one going to stay home? Are they going to have a nanny? Who's going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for those things together? Are you going to commingle all of your money together? My recommendation would be an absolute no. But, how are we going to handle that? Also, credit. Once credit starts getting commingled, that can have a very long term trickle down effect in your life. If somebody's credit is bad and you have no credit on your own and yours is all tied up with somebody else, if you do get divorced or split up or whatever, then it's going to be hard for anyone to rent to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hard for you to do basic things that we do when we have a credit evaluation. So things that seem like insignificant or, oh, I don't want to talk about it because it's boring and tedious. These are the things that will be your
Can change
final
your
undoing
life.
and make your life so difficult if you haven't done it. And it's easy to do. And if you get pushback from your partner who says they don't want to talk about it, then you need to look at your partner and say, but why?
Mm-hmm.
What am I asking that's out of the, like I'm not asking anything from you. In fact, I'm trying to protect you as much as I'm trying to protect myself, right?
Exactly. So in terms of that, there were, three big things that the book highlighted for me in terms of getting ready for marriage, long-term relationship, whatever it may be, right? So I want to touch on prenups, and then I want to touch on commingling funds and the separate trusts. Okay, I had never heard of that before. So these are all things to consider when you're getting ready to get married or being in a really serious long term relationship where money starts to get tied together, right? So let's talk about prenups. Okay, this is a conversation that is very, I don't know why, but it sparks an emotional response out of most people. So I kind of share your mindset of marriage. At the end of the day, you are entering into a form of a business relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
you are.
and you're signing a
There's no dispute. I
contract.
mean, there's
Yeah.
just no disputing that.
Hmm.
It's a business. It's a family business
It
called a
is.
marriage.
It is. So you did not have a prenup in your first marriage,
No,
correct? Okay. And
no,
you have one in your second, right?
I do. Yes.
Okay. So walk me through your thought process on prenups.
So, okay. So when I got married the first time, it was 1987. All right. So that was a long time ago. Um, And no one really talked about prenups unless you were like a movie star or something. And people were under the impression, and again, not many women worked back then. I mean, we were starting to, but it was like I was, there were very few women in the law at the time. I was the only woman in my entering class at my first law firm.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was like me and a bunch of dudes. Uh, and then when everyone passed the bar, the managing partner came down the stairs. They had this big staircase, and all the young guys and me were standing there. I always thought that guy still thought I was a paralegal, and he said, I want to, congratulate you gentlemen on all passing the quiz." And I wanted to say, "Excuse me, I passed the quiz too."
I'm a lady.
I'm a lady. But anyway, whatever. I digress. So no one really talked about it back then. And then as time has evolved, there's a lot of things. Women are now more in the workforce. Women are developing careers. Divorce is more prevalent. Some people are choosing not to get remarried after they get married. I mean, a lot of things happen along the way now, and women are actually part of the financial mix. So 50, I mean, 50% of the population or over were women, and a lot of those women work. Um, so I will say everybody needs a prenup if they can, get their head around it and accept that it is going to improve your relationship, open lines of communication before you get married, and make you actually talk about very important elements besides, what your flowers are going to look like and what kind of dress you're going to have. That's all important too, but those are ephemeral. This is literally a roadmap for your relationship that will, I believe, help you not fall apart. And if you do fall apart, it will help you kind of divide up your assets in a way that is not in a heated emotional state where you absolutely despise each other and want to literally bring that person down. So, why do you need a prenup? Well, 30% of millennials have them now because of student debt. They need to, people need to figure out who is going to be responsible for this student debt. Now, so that's one element of it, delineating, all prior obligations before you come into the marriage. Now, in community property states, in order for, property not to become part of the community, you want to really delineate, and also in equitable distribution states, there's two kinds. There's like 12 community property states, the rest follow equitable distribution. That's the way they divvy up the assets. But if you have property, like you're working, you have a paycheck, you might have a savings account, you might have an investment account, you might have a house that you own. Now, all of those things you own in your own name. I like the idea of everyone trying to getting a trust, because that would be your separate property trust. And then in a prenup, you can delineate all of the separate property that you have. Now, in California, because it's a community property state, they by definition say anything you have before the marriage is not part of community property. But even when I was interviewing uh, the person that I interviewed last week, uh, who's a top lawyer, she was saying it's really important that you have this prenup that like literally delineates. Everyone is aware. This is what I'm coming in with. It's mine. It's going to stay over there. This is what you're coming in with. So, say you had an inheritance from a family member or somebody, you might not want to commingle that. So, if you got an inheritance after you were married and you put it in a joint account, that becomes part of the marital property that will get distributed down the line to both of you. So, in order for that not to happen, you should keep that in your own account with your own name. Put that on your separate property trust. It will be on the schedule, and everyone, it's just belt and suspenders. That's your separate property. So, a lot of people will nowadays say, and my daughter, who's 31, she got married in October, she had a prenup. Um, and so they will say, we're going to keep our paychecks separate. They're going to go into our individual accounts. We'll create a joint account. That will be our commingled account, but we'll be intentional about what we're going to put in that. So if they want to buy a house or they put their grocery money, whatever they're doing, that's the intentionality of it. It isn't like the couple that I talked to the other day who just said, "Oh, we'll get married. Everything's going to be joint, no prenup, no anything." And also, you're not static. Even if you come into the marriage and you're young and you don't have tons, you will eventually have something. So, if, even if it's just a formula, like in my daughter's prenup, whether it's for her or her husband, when they have children, which they both would like to do, one of them might decide to step away from the workforce a little bit, maybe not full time, but maybe part time, and there's a nanny or whatever. But whoever's doing that is going to get penalized down the road. They're not going to be contributing to Social Security. And at this time in our history, we do not credit people who stay home and take care of our next generation of kids with Social Security. They get screwed for doing it. So they're not going to be contributing to Social Security. They're not going to be maxing out on their 401ks, and they're going to be suffering some career development setbacks because of the fact they're not, firing on all cylinders. So how do we take care of that? Well, we came up with a formula where we took a percentage of the salary they were making, plus maxing out on their 401k, plus Social Security contributions, put an inflator of 2% on it. And for the amount of time they were out of the workforce, that would be their base amount that they would get for doing the work for the family. So when I got divorced, the problem was anything I did, moving to London, taking care of the children, all that invisible labor, that was valued at 0 in the end. It wasn't in the first decree, but in the second decree, with all the other tomfoolery that went on in that case, it came down to, hey, uh, we can't do much about it. And so, if there had been a prenup from the get go, that would have been a settlement, and it would have been done and dusted.
And again, you're making these decisions while you love each other, while things are good, while you're
Yes.
talking to your best friend, while you have each other's best interests at heart, instead of
Yes.
when for whatever reason things fall apart. Some divorces are nastier than others, but you just don't know what the future holds. And I love the concept of protecting especially the stay-at-home parent, usually the mother,
Yes.
because I do feel that a lot of times people may stay in relationships that they don't want to be in because they feel financially stuck. Like they are
Yeah,
stuck.
I mean, so many people are in that predicament, and
Mhm.
for people who don't work for long periods of time and they are married, yeah, they can get the spousal benefit from Social Security, but it's half of what your spouse is getting. So when you're doing your financial planning for your retirement, getting like half of what the spouse is getting, um, isn't gonna be the thing that saves the day.
Mhm.
And yeah, you can get a quadro in your divorce, which is maybe get some of the 401k money, the retirement money. But again, you need to go through that process. Why go through the whole thing of negotiating about that when you can say from the get go, at the very least, I'm going to be missing out on this career development, and the salary I was making, I'm not going to be making anymore, and I'm not going to be contributing to Social Security. This is math. We can figure that out.
Mhm.
So it's just a base amount of money that is not going to be in the hands of a judge who
Doesn't know you.
doesn't know you, doesn't know your kids, and depending on whether the judge is a woman or a man. I had many different judges. The first one was a woman, second one was a man, very different outcomes. And in the interim court proceeding that we had before the second one, the woman judge, who I sadly didn't have for the final decision, told my husband she thought he was going to lose, and in the end, he didn't, because the guy who then was the final judge was a 55-year-old guy like my husband.
Not on your
So
side.
he was not so favorable to, as he called me, wife. Um, in the proceedings, wife. So
Wife.
that was my name and wife. So, I think the thing is it's very easy to be cavalier or, thinking sunshine and lollipops. But hey, when you're like, you get divorced at 50 and maybe you stayed out of the workplace for a while and you might not have honed your skills or been doing much in the interim, it has a very different picture in your mind than it does when you're, getting married, and you may not end up in that predicament, which is great,
Exactly, exactly. You may never even have to use it, and that is the ideal situation. But in the event that you do, you've already signed on a dotted line when you get married. Either way, you're signing on a dotted line. You're either agreeing to what the courts are going to set forth if things fall apart, or you're agreeing to what you and the person that you love
Yeah,
agree is what's going to happen if things fall apart. Either way, there's an agreement in place. So I do feel passionately about this because I do know that money is such a huge factor in why divorce happens, such a huge factor in why people stay in relationships that they shouldn't stay in. A huge money's just it permeates every aspect of your life. So if you can learn to take
it
control of it
does.
and have conversations about it, and it changes the landscape of your life, of your relationship, of whatever it may be.
And I still say, like, if you can talk about this in a calm and logical way, and, like, it can be, it's just like any other conversation you're gonna have, with someone that you're gonna spend the rest of your life with, maybe, this person likes guns and you don't like guns, that you're gonna talk about that, right? You're gonna probably
Mhm.
say, "Hey, I'm not sure I wanna marry you if you're gonna have a, gun." And maybe the other person will be like, "Well, I like to shoot, so sorry." This is the same kind
Exactly.
of thing. It's like, "Hey, this is the core of our relationship, right? This is what every day is gonna keep a roof over our head. You may think you want all your kids to go to state school, a state university. I may think I need all my kids to go to some fancy Ivy League school. I don't
Yep.
know. But we need to talk about that, maybe not at the beginning, but we need to understand our value system, not only about, money, but also about our values in general, about how we're going to raise a family and how we're going to fund that. And even if we don't have a family, then how, as a couple, are we just going to navigate the economic landscape of our life? Because things are going to happen over and over again. And if you're not set on that because you can't talk about it, then you don't have a hope in hell. And when 80% of people are splitting up over financial matters, I think that's a pretty big warning sign that not talking about it and making it like any other topic is dangerous.
Okay, so moral of the story is before we get married, before we get into any super serious long-term relationships, we need to open the line of communication about money. We need to start talking about what our money personalities are, what our money language is, what our skeletons in the closet are around money. We need to have a conversation about prenups. We need to have a conversation about commingling our funds, potentially setting up a trust for each of us separately. We need to take the steps to not only protect our future, but also protect the relationship that we want to last, right? That's the moral of the story.
And just as an aside, you can do this like generally people the lawyers will say, and this is a fact, that you should each have a lawyer to represent you in doing this. But you can go online now, and there are various online services that are specifically for do-it-yourself prenuptial agreements where you'll both fill out the questions in the form separately. I also believe there's one called divorce.com that also has a do it yourself prenup. So you can research that. Like if you feel like you're being deterred by employing lawyers to do this, don't let that happen because especially Gen Z millennials, they're tech savvy. You can actually do this and it will be enforceable. Again, it's about starting the conversation, going through these various things that they will guide you through that. And you will feel like once you do it, like I did it in my second marriage, like we said, and real quick, again, we were older coming into it with our different assets and different businesses. But, you know, it was very clear. We had a very open and honest conversation about what was going to happen. Also, I have 3 children. My husband now does not have any children, but I will leave all my assets to my children. So we had that conversation. Um, and so we were adult about it, and now we don't have to think about the money thing. We know how we operate, right? It's all lined up, it's all delineated. It's kind of like a no-brainer. So I just think all of these things will add to the substance of the relationship. So don't let not getting a lawyer deter you. Go online, do it yourself. You can do it yourself. And that can't be the reason not to do it. Just wanted to interject that because I know when people start talking about employing lawyers, they get all, they get a little bit worried about it. But honestly, um, you know, it's really not that big of a deal. It's like any other contract you would do in a business, but um, and it doesn't take away from the other intangible aspects of your relationship.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think it's another tool in the toolbox, right? Another
Yeah, for sure.
another tool to deploy. This was honestly such a great conversation. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me today. This was informative and eye-opening. I hope all of you guys learned and took away from this as much as I did. I am going to be giving away a free copy of Kimberly's book, The Fiscal Feminist. So be on the lookout on my Instagram, on my stories. I absolutely loved this book. Like I said earlier, it was really complex topics broken down in really digestible ways, and I appreciated that. So be sure to follow Kimberly and check out her podcast. All of her links will be in the description. Again, Kimberly, thank you so much for being here today. As always, however you are consuming this content, please be sure to like, comment, share, rate, follow, subscribe, do all of the things. I will see you back next week.